Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hey.
Welcome. Welcome to our formal background chat.
Oh, it must be serious.
I like it.
I quite like it as well. Although if I lean back, sometimes you just sort of disappear into. Oh look,
Yeah.
see, there's my microphone. Ooh, hello.
So why are we all gathered here today in the Church of Zoom?
The Church of Zoom.
The Church of Zoom.
Oh.
We are going to have a bit of a special episode, very special episode, talking about things, events, and our take on some of the stuff that is flying around in the world of dogs at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Is that fair to say? Is that a good?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're a teaching organisation. We are people that our students and members hopefully look to for information, and therefore we thought it would be remiss if we didn't kind of highlight some of the discussions that might be taking place on social media and beyond, because we're all about standing up for what we believe in, and that doesn't mean that you have to try and be derogatory and drag people down or try and diminish their argument, but it does mean that you need to stand up and put forward the facts sometimes, and hopefully that's what we're going to do.
That's what we're going to do. And we have called, slightly tongue-in-cheek maybe, but we have called these Le Chat.
I mean, I just like cats.
Yes.
And French.
And French. So this is Le Chat Part 1. I get to use my French accent there.
It's really good.
It's wonderful, Steve.
Really
there may
good.
well be a Le Chat Part 2.
Oh, he's learned 2 numbers.
Yeah, I could go on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then if there
I
was
could go
another
at least
one.
up to 7.
Oh.
Oh, let's not.
Yeah, but hopefully our Le Chat doesn't go up to episode 7. But there may be a part 2, because we've got a lot of points that we want to cover today. So shall we dive in? What do you reckon?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna give you the starter on this one. Oh well, do we want to? For anyone who's listening, who maybe it's the first time they've tuned in to an episode of Barks on the Bookshelf, maybe they've been tempted in by what's been going on Tinternets and stuff like that. Do we want to introduce ourselves first a little bit? Yeah. Let's go with Jay first. Go on, Jay.
Me? Oh gosh,
Yeah,
I'm the odd one out in a way. So Jay, one of the directors of the Pact, and I'm slightly different and maybe have a really different take on things for this call. In that, I'm a chartered environmentalist. So I actually work in a incredibly regulated sector, and under the similar departments. So a lot of what I work on is with DEFRA. So there's some similarities with the dog sector, and I've worked for 20 years on environmental management, and a lot to do with policy making and how that works as well. So there's quite a bit I wanted to talk about how it works, how you interpret science as a chartered environmentalist, and how policies are developed and how laws work, and what it's like to work in possibly the most regulated sector. Environmental law is the foundations of all European legislation, so there's probably more environmental laws than anything. And I'm chartered. That's under a national recognised body, but that doesn't stop innovation, and it doesn't. It's there to have certain standards, but also help bring more people in and develop. So I'm kind of looking at it from the other side of the fence, going, I don't know why everyone's worried about regulation and things, because I've been working in that for 20 years. So and the other thing to say is I'm not a skilled, qualified, certificated dog trainer at all. And I think just an early thing off the bat is, we all need to recognise our boundaries with our skills, and when we're outside of that, and to kind of say, actually, I don't have expertise in that, I'm not going to talk about that. And I do that professionally in what I do. I don't know everything about the environment, and I work with brilliant people and pass things on. And in this discussion, I'm not going to be talking about dog behaviour and very specific things. I'll probably be sort of sharing reflections on how it works in the environment sector.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. Corinne?
I'm Corinne Goodall. I'm married to Steve. I'm also a PAC director. I have been a dog professional now for around about 9 years, I think it is. And I'm currently on the register of the ABTC as an animal training instructor.
Fabulous. I am Steve Goodall. I feel like I have to say I'm married to Corinne now because you led with that. So I'm also...
We've already
Don't
told
worry.
everyone.
Jay didn't even.
I feel quite bad about it. I didn't realise that was a thing. Corinne stiffed me up completely.
I'm married to Corinne. I once made a clay ashtray in primary school that my dad still owns to this day and is very proud of, although he stopped smoking a long time ago. But I'm also an animal training instructor, a director of PACT. I've been working with dogs. I don't really know how long I've been working with dogs. I always say around 15 years, but that seems too much. But then anything else seems too little. So around that sort of time, but a long time. I think that's me. And Nat.
And me. I don't usually say all of my credentials because it's a bit embarrassing, really, isn't it? But I'm going to do it for the sake of this chat. That anyone listening thinking, who on earth are this lot, you know that we are trusted voices. So I've been working professionally with dogs since about 2008. I am a certificated clinical animal behaviourist through CCAB. I am an ABTC, so Animal Behaviour Training Council registered animal training instructor and clinical animal behaviourist. I work within my own business, but I've also been employed by as a freelancer for the RSPCA, lots of other dog charities for assessments, for local councils doing adoption assessments for dogs, to see if they can live happily with humans. I also have lectured as a module leader on the University of Winchester's Animal Welfare and Society honours BA degree, and through that have got my teaching fellowship. So also guest lectured on a few different university courses as well, and have authored a chapter in a book called Canine Behaviour in Mind with some of the industry's leading behaviourists. So that's me. Lots of other stuff. It's really awkward talking about all of that, but everyone else seems to do it, so I wanted my chance to do it. So that's it. I'll shut up now.
I think it's actually the opposite. I think it's really important that like you say, people know that when they're listening to people that people know what they're talking about. I think.
Well,
I forgot to mention my book.
Yeah, you did. Oh, I also forgot to mention that I'm married to Jay.
Yes, very, very important. And Jay, anything you forgot to mention?
That he loves his
Nothing
wife
comes
very
of it,
much.
So there's been discussions on the internet. There's discussions on the Facebooks. There's discussions everywhere at the moment about dog training, about methodology, whether we should be having these discussions, all of these kind of things. So we thought it would be very, very sensible for us, being in the position that we are in, to talk through some of these points. So what we've basically done is we've made a big list of what some of the main points are. There might be some others that we've missed, but we've picked out the main points that we think, and we're going to go through them piece by piece, bit by bit, and just talk about how we feel about these points, and if there's anything that we can add that we think might be missing from some of the conversations that are being had as well. Number one, can you kick this one off, Nat, do you reckon? Because I think this is a good one for you to start on. Number one, we've decided to talk about what does regulation mean to us. So, Nat, if you can start with that one, and then we can all riff off of you.
Yeah, of course. So if I speak kind of on behalf of PACT to start with, so regulation on a day-to-day means for us that we are accountable to other organisations, and our students and our members are accountable to us, and that's really can only be a good thing, because if you work in an industry where most people are self-employed, it lends itself very easily to kind of cowboy professionals. I'm sure you could think of other examples in different industries, and hopefully Jay can tell us a bit about how regulation works within the environmental sector. But even though the terms dog trainer, dog training instructor, clinical animal behaviorist aren't protected terms, we are surrounded by regulation everywhere. So, all of the products that you use with your dogs, Kongs, toys, whatever, there's some kind of regulation there about the production of those toys so that they're safe and they don't contain carcinogens and all sorts. The food that you feed your dog, whatever you decide to feed your dog, that's for another debate another day. But that will be regulated by the Pet Food Manufacturing Authority, who are beholden to laws on what can be sold and what can be within, what needs to be shown on their labels. Every time we talk to a vet, every time we talk to another kind of professional in our sphere, there's regulations and legislation that go along with that. So the fact that it's not a legal you don't have to do it doesn't mean that it's not there, and doesn't mean that it's not working. So I think sometimes the word regulation can send people running for the hills, and you kind of maybe get worried that you're not good enough, or you're not going to have the right skill set, or you're going to be asked to be tested and you've never been tested before. But I personally see it as a positive thing, and the kind of framework that most businesses, whether you're thinking of PACT as a business or all of the individual businesses that our students and members run themselves, there's regulation absolutely everywhere, and what that allows us to do is to be transparent, show what we're about, have a robust code of conduct and complaints procedure, make sure that our courses aren't just written on the back of a fag packet, and actually they've been thought out, they have learning outcomes and objectives, and really that should be the bare minimum for anyone taking money off someone for a particular service. And so I think we've always been really keen to align ourselves with similar organizations that have the same kind of best practice ethics, and that's why we are a B Corp, that's why we run the business the way we run the business, that's why we're reaching to achieve Ofqual status, that's why we're a member organization of the ABTC, and our courses are recognized by them, and why we are able to kind of subjectively assess our students and members, because for all that backing, all that paperwork, all that hard work behind the scenes, that one word, regulation, kind of simplifies very much. And for anyone listening thinking, oh my goodness, regulation sounds scary, I personally can only see the benefits in it. I completely understand and appreciate how it can seem sometimes that, you know, the ladder's being pulled up after certain people are at a certain level, but that's certainly not what we're about as an organization. And regulation isn't also static. It's not one moment in time that you sign up to and that's it forever. You know, things are constantly evolving, changing. You're having to respond to, you know, industry kind of topics as they come up, and so it's a way of actually organizing yourself and your career and your professional services. Whew, that was long-winded, sorry guys.
That's good. That was nice. I agree. Can I just
Yeah.
Do you agree? Oh, phew, that's all right. That's all right then, isn't it?
Does anyone else want to jump in with something on regulation?
Only to say that Nat and I co-wrote a blog not too long ago about this as well, about that kind of potential fear, or maybe you're a part of an organization and sometimes you're not sure, like, whether the public know about it and what it's doing for you right now. And I guess that my only thing to add to that would be, like, sometimes we've got to think a little bit ahead as well. And like, do you want to be a part of the thing that you want to see happen? Because you obviously joined an organization or you discussed that regulation might be useful. Then we can absolutely think about that future and how we want to see it play out and be a part of it now.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I think for me, just, I mean, I agree with all of those things, and you've both allowed me to not speak very long about this, which is always really, really nice, because I agree with everything you said. But on a bit, maybe another side of the coin to think about is from a pet guardian that is going to get a trainer, to be able to know that there is a standard there, I think is so important. And I can't see another way without regulation to achieve that across the board, what I'm talking about here. I think that's really, really, that's really important to me from a personal standpoint. We'll talk a little bit about ethics and things later on, but if we're gonna have some guiding ethics for how animals should be trained, then again, regulation seems to be the only way really that can be put into place. I think that's fair enough to say.
Having moved to Wales.
Say...
Oh, sorry, Jay, go.
No, go on.
I was only going to add that since moving to Wales and knowing that the ABTC have the vet advocate scheme, I can only say that would have given me absolute confidence in our search for finding. So, you know, it is something that I think people want to see in regards to the public.
I would say, I think regulation's a misunderstood word. I think it's sometimes a bit like bureaucracy. People see bureaucracy as a negative word, but actually it's just how you organize things and take decisions. And, you know, there are different levels of regulation. Matt talked about all sorts of different forms of regulation, you know, legislative regulation, all the way down through to voluntary regulation that people follow. And I genuinely, when I hear a lot of people talk about regulation, I think there needs to be some education for people about what that means. You know, it's a really core part of how I operate as an environmentalist, is regulation in different forms. You know, and we talk about this when we talk about ethics, but, you know, one of the biggest part of legislation to do with environmental management is about principles. So there's laws which are kind of direct laws that we have to follow in certain ways, but then within the Environment Act for the last 20, 30 years, it's been a set of 5 principles. It's not that prescript, and you have to operate between those. And I think people miss that. And also I think people, there's a certain degree of kind of pretend as well. There's you know, if you're operating in a certain level of regulation, it protects, but also people can kind of hide and pretend they're regulated. You know, taking a really specific example of you know, our logo is a registered trademark that's covered by legislation. If you were to put an R in a circle on your brand for your business, it's an instant fine. There's if that gets picked up, the regulation's really tight on that. If you put TM on it, absolutely meaningless in UK law. I think people that put TM on stuff are just pretending that is a trademarked thing. It doesn't mean anything, and it's that does happen quite a bit, where you can pretend that something's regulated by having something that looks official, and it's a bit like when we talk about understanding science and different things like that. There has to be something that underpins it, that kind of gives it the strength that it is. Drifting a bit into the kind of specifics around the dog sector and regulations, though, there are, as Nat said, I always describe it as under-regulated, in that the roles aren't necessarily a regulated role. In the way that I can call myself a chartered environmentalist. If someone used that and weren't chartered under a registered body, then they could get pulled up on that. But pulled up to what extent? Probably not that much, to be quite frank. But they would at least, people could look on a register and they can find my name and they can see that I'm chartered through my practitioner body. But there are certain degrees, within it. You've got the Code of Practice for the Welfare of Dogs, which sets out quite a lot of information. I know it's a statutory instrument. It's not, direct legislation, but it does set quite a bit out. And I think that's used quite a lot in the sector as well. I think one of the things we probably don't shout about enough is the fact that all of the leading dog charities only recommend ABTC dog trainers. You could do a course with any organisation, get a certificate. You go on their website and do all that kind of stuff. You can do our course and go on our website. But the only list of dog trainers that actually matters to, like, the RSPCA and the Dogs Trust and the Blue Cross, and Batsy Dogs recommend is the ABTC list of animal training instructors. So
I guess as a charity, they're sort of beholden to the Charities Commission, so that's their kind of version of the regulation, and which is probably why they then are careful about who they would recommend publicly. Yeah, and to go on that register with the ABTC, you have to follow certain standards and put a significant amount of work in. And people can come up with all sorts of reasons why their certification that they've gone through, and it could be brilliant, but the parent organisation has decided not to be regulated by the ABTC. That's their decision. That's not our fault that those trainers aren't on that list. That's that organisation's option to voluntarily have a certain degree of regulation. And I don't think we should shy away from that. That's nothing to do with us. They could have had a brilliant time doing that, and it could be a great organisation. But we've chosen the path and we've put the effort in to do it, and we shouldn't really shy away from the fact that that's some quite significant voluntary regulation. I think we also need to, if we're going to say statements like that, we need to be careful that we are not tarring all organisations that haven't decided to be within the ABTC with the same brush. There are very different groups of organisations. There are wholly ethical and effective organisations that are not within the ABTC that we rub along very nicely with. There are also organisations that are not within the ABTC because they actually, even if they applied, they wouldn't get in because they are not following the code of ethics that is set out by the ABTC, and they're two very different strands of the sector, shall we say?
And that's
that wasn't.
No, I know. I just wanted to make it clear.
It's important that we clear that up, and that's kind of This is the crux of the matter, really, isn't it? Why we're here talking about this a little bit, because of that, like, very real degree that's gone out the other way of trainers that are cropping up that are unethical. We'll talk about ethics in a minute. We'll get to that in a second. Using methods that are punitive, aversive techniques, things along those lines. That there seems to be an epidemic of this sweeping across the land at the moment, and there's a lot of call to sort of unify trainers, to get trainers to have a conversation, to get professionals to have a conversation, so we can sit down together and learn from one another. And this is a lot of the narrative that's going on at the moment. So there's some really interesting points about regulation there. So we've mentioned the word ethics. I went on a deep dive about ethics when I was sort of like prepping for this a bit, because I kind of always thought I knew what ethics meant. And then just sort of like having a quick Google, I actually found out that I don't actually know really what ethics means. I always used to think, well, I know to a point what ethics means. I know where my ethics are, and I know what I thought it meant, and it does mean that, but there's other ways of talking about it, which I think would be worth exploring here. But I always kind of saw morals as a kind of internal almost compass, and ethics as kind of an agreed thing that we agree with our peers that we do. Like that was kind of the way that I've always gone when it comes to ethics versus morals. But there's all sorts of ways of looking at it. So the question that we've got here is, what are ethics versus morals, and how should that inform the decisions we make as trainers? So anyone want to jump in on that point there?
What, that tiny philosophical debate that we could talk for 10 hours about?
Yeah. Obviously, this could be the chat part one, couldn't it? Completely. But yeah, I mean, let's chip away at the tip of that iceberg a little bit.
I'll have a go.
Go on.
So obviously I've taught ethics, ethics related to animal welfare. If you're listening to this and you have an interest in animal welfare, you have already considered your morality and your ethics. If you are listening to this and you've gone and chosen a course and you're studying with them, you've also gone through kind of a bit of an academic ethical process as well there, where you've looked at who you want to learn from and why. So I think morals are more about maybe your influences when you were younger, first-hand accounts of things, what really builds you as a person, and how you how things sit with you. And ethics are, like Steve said, that kind of wider kind of societal what's deemed as acceptable and not. And obviously it's such a huge subject, we're not going to be able to cover it at all. But the reason that it comes up so much is, and we actually use it in our marketing as well, we call ourselves ethical and effective trainers. We're welfare friendly dog trainers. And that means that we are trying to really put out there the fact that we're considering how your dog is feeling when we are deciding what training we might do. And for me, that's really the only way that you can go forward. You can go round and round in circles about but what if, but your ethics shouldn't deviate unless the conundrum you're given is completely like off the chart, weird and wacky, then your ethics should be quite strong. And it's something that we ask our students to do a lot as well, and consider. One of our assignments is actually think about your ethical positioning within the sector. What are you okay with, what are you not okay with? And that's not something we spoon feed people, but that's what the code of conduct is there for, to have a framework of what you can then build from. Didn't really answer the question, but I've just said words.
And I mean, I could probably talk about this. We could all probably talk about this for hours. There's so many different things I want to talk about on this. I think it'd be interesting to unpick a bit about what ethics mean with the different roles of a dog trainer. You know, your individual ethics to an extent don't really matter. You've got multi-tiered, you've got the dog, you've got yourself, you've got the guardian you're working with, you've then got the dog, and maybe there's kids, or maybe there's other people in the park. You know, one of the discussions I've seen, someone talked about, you know, society and different tiers, and I think ethics, a lot of the discussions I see about ethics, people are so focused on their own personal ethics, and I think to some extent that's the bottom of it. That's the last ethics to be concerned about. If you think about all the other ethics, you've probably got them all up in a line. And actually, when I look at this from an environmental perspective, we don't talk about ethics at all. I mean, I mentioned about principles, and this drifting a bit into the sort of science debate, which I can talk about at length about all sorts of different environmental science issues. But you know, one of the key things that is the foundation of environmental management is the precautionary principle. You know, it is looking at what's in front of you and understanding if there could be a certain degree of harm, using the evidence that's there. And if you don't have enough evidence to show that there isn't harm, you don't do it. And I think that principle for me is what this ethics debate should be about. I don't, you know, whether one person's ethics is different to another person's ethics, that's absolutely fine. We can go into a whole philosophical debate about Kantism and things like that, and how, you know, that works. But at the end of the day, you know, at the end of the day, it kind of links to that. And you know, I was sort of doing some reading around the Hippocratic Oath, you know, and that was nearly 2,000 years ago. Doctors in Rome kind of swore this oath to do, well, a butchered version of it, a bridge version of doing no harm. It doesn't specifically say that, you know, we look into it, but you know, that approach for understanding what you're doing, learning the Hippocratic Oath. It's updated loads of times. It was updated a few years ago. There's loads of versions of it and stuff, but it essentially setting out, you know, working within your boundaries, looking at what you're doing, not doing harm. If you don't understand if there's harm involved in it, you don't do it. You know, I think that is quite key. And yeah, if we talk about ethics and science and stuff, I'll come back to precautionary and just unpick that in a bit more. But I think for me, I think that is it. We're looking at the wrong thing. I think we're talking about ethics, you're talking about the wrong thing. And obviously, there is a huge amount of ethics on it, but when people talk about it, I don't think that's what they're actually talking about. Because if they're focused on their own ethics, I think they're not thinking about everyone else's rights.
Well, recently, Stephen Nat, you spoke to Mark Bekoff, and in his most updated edition of his book, he discusses how the 5 freedoms and the word welfare doesn't go far enough, you know, because it leaves loopholes and things like that. And I think potentially the word ethics is maybe open at the moment to interpretation, which it shouldn't be.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think it's you know, there are lots of things that we've kind of moved through as a sector about, you know, unlabel me, and maybe we need to unlabel some of these words as well. But also, I think to give the listeners a view of what's happening with aversive trainers and the kind of the argument that they're leaning into here, and an argument that we will not get drawn into. And the reason why we're keeping things kind of higher level in terms of the discussion points is what they've done is they've taken a very robust kind of stance. So PACT, for example, we have a very robust stance on what we feel is ethical. In our view, our code of conduct is like our version of the Hippocratic Oath: do no harm. Now, rather than going down the route of, it's not good enough, it doesn't do this, what they've done is go define harm. And that is just taking everything off pieced, really, which is what we need to bring it back to, which is, but my interventions should not cause any harm or suggestion of harm. You know, when you get, like Jay said, when you get into those little nitty-gritty bits of, if you're not sure. So the kind of discussions I see, there's lots of requests for evidence. Show me that they're feeling pain. Show me that they're doing this. It's like, even if there's a suggestion, we come right back again to the main principle, which is do no harm in your pursuit of training or behavior interventions. And, you know, Corin's brought up the messiah of that, Mark Beckhoff. If any of you have not read his books, read his blog, listen to him, he is absolutely amazing, and he is the go-to on a lot of this, along with Frank McMillan. I mean, we can't start listing because we'll forget people, but we've tried to get most of them on our podcast, so you have a look through at the back catalogue. But the discussions that I sometimes hear from people that proclaim this kind of role in our sector that they've bestowed upon themselves, no one's bestowed it upon them, is quite frankly insulting to a lot of the amazing academics that have put their whole career and their whole life ethos, you know, they're living this, people that are really campaigning for animal welfare rights. It's not just something you switch on and off, you either live it or you don't. And I just find it pretty disgusting, some of the things that I read, I hear, I see, that people are doing to dogs in the name of training, and then trying to defend it by questioning some of the greatest minds that have put together such a body of amazing research. That's me.
And I want to talk as well about I think there's I'm not stating here that I understand science. I'm not even particularly science literate in any massive way. I love it.
He always puts himself down, honestly.
You do, Steve.
It really told you to stop putting yourself down.
I couldn't hold myself in a conversation, you know, with many people when it comes to science. But one
like
thing
Mark Beckhoff, like you did, but
yeah.
Actually, you're interesting. You talk about the precautionary principle. There's a fantastic passage in his new book about that, Jay. I'll have to send you some stuff. It's really, really good. That's interesting you brought that up. But yeah, people are always looking for this totem, for this one study, this one experiment, this one thing that's going to tell you, that's right, that's wrong, you know, whatever it is. And not a lot of people talk about the body of, I think that's what you said, the body of work, you know. And not a lot of people come at it from the animal welfare side as well, because within the animal welfare sciences, that body of work it's huge. It is a mountain of work that has been done there, and you know, everyone's just looking for an experiment done with a shock collar, you know, that will tell you black and white, this and this. Does it hurt the dog? Does it? You know, when a lot of that stuff is kind of subjective to a degree, and I don't like the fact that body of welfare science gets ignored a lot of the time, you know.
Everything falls back to welfare. Sorry, go on, Karen.
I was only going to say, talking about like the hard work and you know, I'm not going to sit here and say that the ABTC are perfect, but the hard work and everything that they're doing to work towards a better future for all of the animals that we share our lives with it just has to be admired. And to say you're not going to be a part of something until it's perfect, I don't think anything would be.
No,
we're always striving for change.
Yeah, life is not like that, and neither are scientific investigations. Okay, so for any of you coming at this from maybe a non-scientific background, you basically you come up with a question with a scientific investigation. You come up with, I don't know, Jack Russell Terriers like broccoli more than carrots. Okay, and then you write your little hypothesis, which is what that is. That's what you think you're going to find, and then you write your experimental design. So that includes how many dogs are you actually going to involve? Okay, so if I wrote a study that was Jack Russells prefer carrots rather than broccoli, and my literature review of that is the fact that I own or I live with one Jack Russell who prefers broccoli to carrots, and I write about my experiences. And then my experiment is I put one piece of broccoli and one piece of carrot down in front of my one Jack Russell, and woo, they ate the broccoli. Oh my God, brilliant. And then I can publish my research and quintessentially say that Jack Russells like broccoli more than carrots. You can see how absurd that seems, because we've got such a small sample size. We haven't taken into account any previous data, whether that be qualitative data or quantitative data. We haven't taken into consideration any environmental conditions, what happened on the test day, whether it's a longitudinal study over a year or whether it was just 2 minutes once, what statistical analysis I've done, etc. That's one part that you can rip apart when you're reading a piece of research. But the other part is, why was this allowed to happen in the first place? What kind of hoops did this researcher have to go through in order to get their paper published? And what happens in academia when researchers are doing writing papers and it gets published out of the university is that every university has an ethical review panel. This is coming back to our ethics again. So if I went to them with my PhD thesis proposal, with my one Jack Russell under my arm and a broccoli and carrot in the other hand, they're going to be asking me things like, well, are the needs of that dog being met? Is there consent? Will there be any harm done? Are carrots and broccoli even safe for dogs? All of those things are going to be considered within the ethical review. Now, what you've got to think about is that our companion animals, dogs, domesticated dogs, are covered by one area of legislation, the Animal Welfare Act in the UK, and lab animals, so beagles bred in labs or rats or mice or whatever other species you want to think about, they are covered by a completely separate piece of legislation. And so that's where the welfare debate starts to fall apart as well, because actually we're already categorizing these same sentient species in different ways because of the way that they have been bred by humans. So that once you start to get, I'm going off the topic here, I know that, but what I really want everyone to have a real good appreciation of, or at least maybe do a little bit of a fall down a well on Google, is just to look at the different steps that are required for these studies, and how to actually pick apart research that might have been published, because it does sound very impressive when someone can say, well, a study in blah blah in 2002 showed this, and yeah, that sounds great, but how many people actually, if they hear that on a podcast, then go to the study, read it, look at the experimental design, look at the conditions that the dogs were kept in? Were they actually dogs, or were they lab raised dogs, or were they companion animals living in a normal home environment? A lot of the body of work that's come out of academia relating to the use of aversive methods is also very dependent on the owner's perception of behavior. So they have like scores of, did they seem happy, sad, etc. So a lot of that stuff, if once you start delving into it, you can start picking it apart a little bit. Science isn't perfect. You're never going to have that that one paper that does show what you want. And if you do find it and you write your point around it, that's very poor academic practice. When you're writing about a subject, you should do a very vast literature review first, and then weigh up things that either combat or support your argument. You don't go, right, I want to prove that e-collars are really good at stopping dogs from chasing sheep. Oh, look, I found a paper that says it does. And then I'm just going to spout it, because that's not the scientific method. And that is what I see happening. And it easily draws people in to say, well, what about this paper? What about this paper? And actually, that's kind of the wrong argument to have in the first place, because you're forever going to be going backwards and forwards then. And really, I think we need to just come back to the very simple processes of that Hippocratic Oath, you know, the guiding principles, ethics, welfare, because that keeps it simple, or at least a little bit simpler. And none of us are even saying that the animal welfare legislation and the way that non-human animals are treated in this country are perfect either. Doesn't mean we can't, you know, use them and lean on them when we need to. When you are either moaning at science for proving things wrong, or leaning on science to bolster your argument, you're always going to become unstuck. So you need to be able to read around subjects as well. Because if we just looked at science, then in 1987, there was still a wide school of thought that children under the age of 1 didn't feel pain. There were still procedures taking place of children under the age of 1 going into surgery with no anesthesia in 1987. So you can't lean on that type of science. It can't do the job we need it to. We need to do the job we need it to, and be supporting those people in research establishments that are, you know, really pushing the boundaries on information and trying to get that peer-reviewed information out there. But the whole, you know, well, this study says this, well, this study says that, it's just not useful for anyone, because it's not actually looking at the real life, what's happened in the research.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I was one of the examples I use all the time in the environmental sector is about asbestos. Like, everyone here, I'm sure everyone listening knows that asbestos is bad for you and it kills people.
Sorry?
It causes all sorts of cancers. Yeah.
That'll be your next story. You've gone through septic tank, now gas, now asbestos.
Let's educate
asbestos.
Steve.
That's me changing the dinner menu tonight, Corinne.
No sandpapering your 1970s Artex. Asbestos was, they realized in 1920 that asbestos killed people. You know, there's scientific evidence that it kills people. It wasn't fully banned in the UK until 1990. There was, you know, the body of evidence grew. There was lots of issues with, you know, vested bodies who, you know, were involved in mining asbestos. It's still quite common in certain countries to use asbestos in some places, even though across the whole rest of the world everyone knows it kills people. You know, it's actually one of the reasons for the precautionary principle coming in. Germany was one of the first countries to ban asbestos. There was dozens and dozens of developers in the UK stopped using asbestos before 1990. But it took that long to go from science to policy. And again, you know, Nat's dead right. You know, science is really hard, research is really hard. Going through the kind of ethics process is really tough. And that's part of the reason for things like the precautionary principle. It's also one of the core elements of the precautionary principle is that if you are a proponent of something, so if you were sort of saying now, oh, well, I don't see any issues with asbestos, it's great. the onus would be on you to prove that is fine. It wouldn't be on everyone else to prove that the whole weighted body of evidence shows it's not. I think I'm always minded of, I think it's Jimmy Fallon, there's a brilliant thing about the kind of red-blue debate about climate science. I spent 20 years debating climate science with people, and there's a great little video where they say, oh yeah, we're going to do a red-blue debate, we're going to get this person here who's like doesn't believe the world's flat, and then we get this person here who's a climate scientist, and then they wheel out 98 more climate scientists to show that is not a 1v1 debate. It doesn't work like that, because the weighted body of evidence is such. And particularly climate science, if you then unpick that person, you'll find all sorts of reasons and biases and reasons why that other person's there. And so I think from a sort of science and how that develops into things, but I think how things develop, and we talked about regulation at the top of this, isn't about science. Sometimes science isn't the reason why things change. Sometimes it's predominantly society.
Culture,
laws and regulations and everything come in because of people and how things develop. Maybe there's a big incident, maybe something happens, and suddenly, a nuclear event happens in Japan and Germany bans nuclear generators. There's things happen that trigger it that aren't, the science has always been there. There's always been that weighted science, and it just takes the moment. And I think, I've worked on policy development and stuff for a long time, worked with politicians for years. And, you're quite often, nothing's changed. The science hasn't changed. It's pretty much, it's refined and it's finessed, and we've, with the body is developed and things, but it's a moment. It's people sitting on a bridge and then suddenly they declare a climate emergency, even though in 1970 we had all of that data in front of us. It's not science that's going to get to a point where there's stronger regulation in the pet industry. It's people, and it's politicians, and it's maybe certain issues and things that have happened that kind of do that. And I think hiding behind science or expecting science to make that happen, it won't, because that's not how things change and move forward. Even if it's just so obvious, say 1920, people dying. And I think asbestos, again, is another good example of this, in that it's something that in the moment, no one's noticed the harm, and it takes time to unravel. And then you look back and say, oh, that thing we've been doing all that time, that's triggered that. And some people get asbestosis instantly, and some people 30 years, depending on the type of material and the approach. And you could mirror that with certain tools and things used in the sector. And also, they're now seeing people secondary pick up asbestosis. Maybe someone that worked on something has come home from work and it's been on their clothes and it's given it to their kids and stuff. And again, you see that in all sorts of different things and sectors. But the time and how that develops, and kind of waiting for science to nudge that forward. I've been waiting. Climate science is, they talk about science being settled. It's I think we're bearing the fruit of that, unfortunately. But that's 50 years it's been strong. I mean, the greenhouse gas effect was identified in the 1800s. So I'm sorry, 1900s. But that's time, unfortunately. But it's how those develop into policy and change.
We should dig out that Jimmy Fallon video and put it in the show notes, because I think last point from me on academic ethics, but I think the example of that, there would be no scientists backing up the aversive tools, because it wouldn't get university ethical approval. You wouldn't get ethical approval to slap shock collars on dogs and see what happens in a behavioural study. You just wouldn't. That's where those studies fall through the cracks, because then they have to use the laboratory animals legislation, or it's in a country where there's different legislation anyway. But it's a really nice visual way of just showing that weighting and the body of evidence.
Yeah, and so pulling this around to our next point, because I think there's a nice route into this next point here. I'm gonna jump one point because I think there's a nice way in. But should we have discussions between camps? I think like it's pretty clear from what we're talking about there, where us, well, certainly as an organisation, where our ethical standards are, and we talked about the weight of evidence, the body of evidence. So, particularly in the welfare sciences, what they tell us about the use of aversive stimuli on, well, not in fairness, not just dogs. That body of science is out there for all sorts of animals. For me personally, I think I have maybe a slightly different view to some of the others. So it'd be interesting to see. I don't mind having discussions. Like I don't mind. I quite enjoy it. I quite enjoy talking to people. And I'm always, when I'm in a discussion, I am always, or I like to think I am. Maybe not always. Corin will probably say something different, but I'm always listening to learn. Do you know what I mean? So I do want to hear what other people have got to say, and I want to understand what other people have got to say. And I love that. And I think that's something that we should be good at. And we should be good at being able to have a discussion, a debate in a friendly way, be that one-on-one, in a group, on social media. I'm sure we can all agree the world would be a nicer place if that happened. But in terms of...
You're such a dreamer, Steve.
Yeah. But in terms of like talking to someone else about this, when a side of the argument is not supported by that ethical side or supported by that weight of evidence. And I know a lot of the words flying around and that include things like unity and things like that, and bringing us together, and like you said, unlabeling. Let's not call ourselves this. Let's just call ourselves dog trainers. I got a problem when it comes to that, because it's that unity bit that becomes problematic for me, because then I'm just throwing out all of that ethics, all of that body of evidence. I don't know if anyone else has got a point on that they want to talk about whether we should have these conversations. What's the benefit of these conversations? What is the drawback of these conversations? Because people talk about things like platforming, legitimizing, all of these things as well. And I think from the outside, or from someone who's maybe a new trainer looking in, it can seem like, and I've been like this, it can seem like, well, yeah, the more conversation, the better. We should have these conversations. If you're going to change minds, then without these conversations, how are you going to do it? So I just thought it might be a nice way into that conversation for anyone.
Well, I guess my personal opinion is I don't think you can change minds in the settings that you're kind of talking about, like social media. I'm not sure how many minds do get changed, maybe on one-to-one or like in smaller groups. Discussions can be had in that manner, but I don't think that I'm going to go to Elaine Anderson, who taught me a term this week on social media that I had not heard of before, called Gish Gallop. And I think this maybe is something to consider if you're ever entering into a conversation and you start to see this happening. So Gish Gallop is a rhetorical technique in which a person in a debate attempts to overwhelm an opponent by abandoning formal debating principles, providing an excessive number of arguments with no regards for the accuracy or strength of those arguments, and that are impossible to address adequately in the time allotted to the opponent. Gish galloping, my phone's gone, prioritizes the quantity of the gallopers' arguments at the expense of their quality. And I think we have to be wary of that.
Yeah. I'd never heard of this either. I thought it was brilliant. And I've seen it happen. I've seen examples of it. And I think, if we keep it simple, should we have discussions between camps? Not the type of discussions I've seen. I don't want to go into them. I don't want to talk to those people if that's how I'm going to get spoken to. I don't want to be
So-
interrupted constantly. Sorry, I'm interrupting you now.
No, I think I was interrupting you.
No,
That's
no.
me. I'm terrible at that. But what I was going to say is we're vegans or predominantly vegans in this chat. How many conversations, even if you'd love everyone to be vegan, how many conversations are you engaging with online to change people's minds? I don't think we're going to change anyone's mind on social media. It's probably we just make ourselves feel a bit rubbish because we got told we're lacking in vitamin something.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
And I think that's, I mean, yeah. No, I was just going to say, I think it's a good example of where I think it might have been, you know, you guys talking about something, maybe you talked about it on the podcast you recorded earlier, but, you know, developing relationships and bringing people in and, you know, being a nice person and them trying stuff out. You know, I don't know if you said the story about your neighbour.
No, I
who
didn't
sort
talk
of
about it actually.
changed what product they were buying, but you know, that's through relationships. You know, I think
Yeah.
it's you know, the other side of it is that, you know, the social media stuff is pushing for clicks. You know, an argument is a great way to get noticed. People are like, oh, check this out. These people are having an argument. You know, it sounds really great and it gets people in, but it just doesn't. That's not how you change behavior and change. That's not how you guys teach guardians to work with dogs. It's not.
No way.
So why would you do that with each other?
It also it doesn't mean you know, the argument is always polarized. Okay, oh, you're a positive reinforcement trainer, so you just let your dog do whatever and wait till they do something nice and then you give them a cookie. Yeah, because that's how skilled I am. That's what I do. I just wait around for my dog to do something and then I give them a cookie. Well done. Great understanding of learning theory.
And there's our conference, you know, the Kill All Dogs conference that we got coming up.
Exactly. Yeah. and I the same thing has happened with individual trainers' ethics, morals. I saw a really nice little cartoon the other day, and it was like two people on a bridge, and there was a gap in the bridge, and one person said, oh, can I come over and talk to you, like, can I come and be in your gang, basically? And they're like, yeah, of course you can, come over. So, oh, can I bring my e-collar with me? No, you can't, but you're very welcome. And it's like, I shouldn't have to, as a qualified, accredited, experienced, practical dog trainer and behaviorist, I shouldn't have to dilute my ethics for you. I don't believe there is any place for pain in training. E-collars inflict pain. Therefore, they're not anything that I am interested in learning about, having demonstrations of. You will not change my mind. I don't want to use them. Therefore, there are some people that, unfortunately, they don't want that kind of discussion. And my personal experience of people on that side of the bridge has been bullying, has been rude, has been making videos of me and putting disgusting comments up about me and my dogs. And so why would I want to go wading into that? And that there's just, I know that's probably a small number of people, but I just see it so often that why would I want to? You know, of course I'm here if you want to have a chat. Like, but it's not going to happen on social media, and it's certainly not going to happen in, you know, hundreds of thousands of people suddenly seeing the light and you know, turning off their aversive tools. But the difference I can make is to my clients, students, friends, people I meet in the pub, when it's solicited as well, when it's asked for. I don't go round the park looking for people using aversive methods and, you know, giving them my 2 cents worth. That's no thanks. Don't want to get involved in those discussions either. So I just think there's a huge lack of respect, and the word unity is not what I have experienced at all from that side of the fence.
No, it doesn't feel like there's a, you know, there would be a lot of unifying by all of us lot moving right, or whatever direction you want to call it, that would be the only way it would unify, and I think that speaks volumes. There is one other point though that I think is worth talking about here, because before we move on to the next point, I used to listen to a lot of stuff. Like I used to get quite into listening to like debates and things, like sort of atheism debates and things along those lines. And the thing you've got to bear in mind is it's not just trainers or even practitioners who are listening to these debates. It's not just those people, it's other people. It's pet guardians, it's people that are maybe thinking of becoming trainers. And that could be a good and a bad thing, because these people are trying to formulate their ideas about, figure out how they're going to get training, starting in their own training careers or something along those lines. So while you have to approach this stuff with caution, obviously, if you are going to, I kind of had this idea that if you want to do it, crack on. Like I kind of, if you're able to navigate that from a mental health perspective, and be prepared for the fallout of social media and whatever, then crack on and go for it. I might even listen to it. So, and I also support 100% people that don't want to engage in that discourse for all of those reasons as well. But I think if you are going to do it, you need to, or people from our side of the fence, if you like, need to show others how they can actively and kindly disagree with one another. I think that's important. And I know that you what you just said there, Nat, is like, why would I want to get involved in that? And I completely agree with that. But I think if you are getting involved in those things, even on Facebook, you need to do it in a kind of respectful. No, I don't know if respectful is the right word.
No, I think respectful is good. And it's like what we say to the students all the time, if you have a criticism, it needs to be about the methods, not the individual, not the person that's using it, all that kind of stuff. Because going full circle back to ethics again, the way you conduct yourself as a professional or a student within a sector, it is part of what you sign up to for PACT Code of Conduct and Ethics. That doesn't mean you can go, causing World War III over on someone's Facebook page.
And that's kind of the sorry.
No, go on.
I was going to say that's kind of the problem with Facebook, isn't it? Because it's there, isn't it? It's comment. There's a box there. It's like inviting. It's inviting you to say something. You must have something to say. Write it in this box. Come on, So it's very hard. But I think a civil disagreement is okay. And like you said, and there has to be kind of rules to how you engage with people. But
I know how you feel about debating, because you do choose to watch it in many areas of your interests. But what I would say is I'm not entirely sure. And I do think that the way you describe it can happen, but I also think it can perhaps cause confusion, self-doubt. And I'm not sure it's always helpful, especially those new people considering taking that journey or just starting out. I think it must be really confusing.
Oh my God, so confusing. Like, I remember there weren't many like dog TV shows on when I was growing up, and I knew it was what I wanted to do, and I had a job in a kennels from when I was like 12. So, and people around me were watching, Cesar Millan, that kind of stuff, and you do watch it, and I think it's such a different experience watching that now. And it'll be a different experience for me in 10 years time when I know even more, but I think if those of you listening are starting out on your journey, just have your little safety hat on where you're like, okay, I'm just going to question some of this, and please lean on a safe community of like-minded trainers that shouldn't, if they are supportive and ethical, they shouldn't berate you if you ask questions about things. If you go, oh, I've seen this, I really don't know what I think about it. Has anyone got an experience? And you get jumped on, like, how dare you even think about that? That's not a supportive community. Find your family, find your tribe where you can open conversations that are tricky, that are difficult, and where you're not going to be judged. You might have even used these tools in the past and you want to be able to talk about it and your experience. And they're the safe discussions. They're still difficult, but that's more of a conversation, I feel. And both parties are then learning something. What I see a lot, well, I try not to, because I don't see it as a good use of time, is just people butting up against each other all the time and willy waggling, trying to get one up over each other, trying to quote one more research study because I'm more well read than you, and that doesn't do anyone any favors.
No, I worry about how it is navigating your way through that, and I just think that we create that environment for those in-person conversations at fieldwork, don't we, with our students? Like, we talk about tools and, how they are used. And we just want anyone that has been ever in a place where they've used those to be able to say, oh, they're able to have that conversation in person. And I think, on social media, that's not an easy conversation to navigate.
I think going back to the kind of core of it, that I actually think that it's all framed wrong. If I use the example of like climate science, one of the kind of strongest fields of people talking about climate science and kind of denialism, or whatever kind of term you want to use, is to shift it into a belief structure. So do you believe in climate science? And if you're a scientist, you're just like, you can't believe in science. That's not actually a thing. Maybe if you're what's it, the
what does share think
or something.
Sorry, I can't hear do you believe without thinking of life after love.
But I think if you use phrases like ideology or believe the science or any of those kind of phrases, that playbook has been going on for 50 years with climate science, dogma, all of that stuff. That is unscientific language. It's a really good way to shift the narrative away from evidence-based decision making and talking about precautionary principles, that kind of stuff, to start to say this group of people here but don't believe that what they're doing is causing harm, or this I think completely remove the word belief or ideology or this group of people, whether they do or don't use certain aversive kind of tools and stuff. I've seen this hugely in climate science, where you shift it into belief, and I think and that's when you start to kind of go, oh, well, those all of those scientists that teach at these universities, they just believe that this is a bad thing to do. Like it's not about belief. You don't get an academic research paper through the assessment process because you believe that was right. That's not how science works. And having faith in something is sometimes the kind of downward spiral. I think some of those discussions I've seen have been they've kind of thrown that accusation at groups. Oh, they're really, as you say, dogmatic. They're really kind of and I think that's it's not giving service to actually using evidence and information to take decisions. And it's, as I say, it's a playbook I've seen massively in the climate area.
Well, the other playbook which is used a lot is those who can do, those who can't teach, which again is just insulting beyond belief. This is where the kind of show me, you do it. I want to see a video of it. It's just a massive misunderstanding of the nuance in teaching. You learn from good teachers, not as a fluke, but because of the hard work and the ability of that teacher. And we're not just animal trainers, we're animal training instructors. So there is an element of teaching and coaching in every time we are trying to help someone with their dog. So we all need those skills as well. And yeah, the lack of practical ability is something that I also find very difficult. And I put in the same wheelhouse as that, belief, ideology, prove it type goading almost that we sometimes get.
I find, you've given a great segue onto the next little point here about, often an argument that you see is there an issue with the lack of practical training not only being offered by organizations, but the lack of practical training, at the high end of people talking, universities and things along those lines. I think it's a bit of dog trainers have to have a good practical skill. Of course they do. And this is why, again, regulation would be it's kind of a funny argument to put forward, because regulation would be a great way into having a line in the sand about where everyone's skill is. Theoretical knowledge, practical knowledge, being able to practically apply things. Regulation would be a really good point to get all of that. And that seems that everyone wants a bit of that. So do you think that there's they point a lot at current teaching organizations as that being a big problem, which I guess we fall into that category. So are we not providing enough practical training, to our students, and what is the
ask me
I'll ask Corinne.
We absolutely are. I sit and I watch and yourself, Steve, how many students are you watching do practical training? And the ATI standard, there's the knowledge and understanding, which has how many points? Because I don't normally
27?
Look at these ones. Yeah, and there's 30 points in the practical element of it. So your practical skills. So that does involve, like Nat was talking about. So that's the animal training instructor role. And some of that is show your practical skills, because it's not necessarily them handling the dog. We're not watching that. In fact, I prefer it when I'm seeing an animal training instructor coach somebody who lives with their dog to do it themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what that's we're looking for all those points to be hit within the assessment. So the ATI standard is very robust, as is the ABT and the CAB and the AT level.
It blows my mind, that thing about practical, because it's first of all, everyone's got to start somewhere. So are you going to end up as the best, most practical dog trainer with all the practical skills you'll ever need after doing a year of our ATI course? Probably not. You'll be a very good standard, but then you go on from that, and then you learn past that. You do more learning, you add to your practical toolkit, you take a bit from here, you take a bit from there, and you build it and build it and build it. Arguably, your toolkit will never be as full as you ever want it, and something will inspire you to go somewhere else and look at something else and do something else. The amount of times I go down little wormholes with tiny minutiae things about the practical ability of dog training. This kind of speaks to another point that we're going to talk about today, which is the time it takes, because that's another thing. People seem to be putting forward a moral and ethical argument as to when you have a guardian that's got no time, stressed out, their dog is doing something that is very annoying to them, that the positive reward-based techniques, whatever you want to call them, would take longer. So is there ever an ethical argument? I mean, I'm pretty sure I know what everyone's going to say, but is there ever an ethical argument that in that instance, because of the time it will take, and maybe the skill of the person that's going to actually be teaching that dog, because remember, you are coaching someone to train a dog, is there ever an argument that an aversive would be quicker, therefore
No.
more ethical from them.
No.
And
No. And if you think that's the answer, then you are not a good enough teacher.
Yeah.
And
Also, I think
I feel like we can't win sometimes, because if sometimes management is berated, and that we can go in with our quick fixes and they are management, and then we've provided a stress relief for the human who is struggling with behaviors that the dog is doing, and then we can go in and then with our training plan, you know, we don't often stop at the management, but there are quick fixes. Okay, let's stop this right now. Right now we're in a learning space. Now let's look at that. And there are occasions, because we can't control what clients want out of their lives, that is enough.
Yeah.
And we tell our trainers to be okay with that, like be content that you helped. You know, that's all they wanted, and that's all they really had time for. And they weren't able, for whatever reason, to implement those things without you. So
I can't tell you.
I think
hello, Grumpy.
Come
on then.
I can hear a pongling in the background.
She's had a very boring day, and she's
like
letting me know about it.
You're
Just
talking to a ghost.
Just quickly on that point, Karen, I can't tell you the number of times that I work with people where you've done maybe 1 or 2 sessions with them, and then they've gone cold on you. They've disappeared off the face of the planet, and you're like, you know, I really thought we had a connection there. I really had them. You know, I'd drawn up like a 3-page training plan that we were going to do over the course of 5, it's like 5 sessions to get to the end goal, and then they've gone, they've disappeared. But then maybe I've bumped into them in a cafe, or maybe they've waved at me across the gate of the training field, and I've gone down to chat to them, and they've been like, "Oh, I just wanted to let you know that what we did was brilliant. It changed my life. It made everything so much easier. I stuck a bit of bloody film up on a window, and that was it. That was all I needed."
Yeah, and, there should be no shame in that whatsoever.
No,
but
and of course,
also,
I really wanted them to, if it was like a recall problem or something like that, I really wanted to get into that and do that and help them reach their goals. But for some people, that's enough.
And for some people, and this does not necessarily reflect on you and your ability as a trainer or behaviourist. Some clients just may have gone, do you know what? Nah. And moved on, gone to someone else. Yeah. That's okay too. We are with our clients for such a small amount of time. And just because we desperately want them to be as passionate as we are about the way things could be improved for their dog's welfare doesn't necessarily mean it happens. And I think the time thing is just a completely hollow argument that's going to collapse on itself. And it always brings me back to all of this stuff about practical skills. Did you ever watch or read This Is Going to Hurt, about the NHS A&E doctor? And
yes.
The thing they say is watch one, do one, teach one. That's pretty much all they get sometimes in emergency medicine. So if you were unfortunate enough to be in an A&E situation, would you want a junior doctor that had watched one, done one, and then was teaching one? Or would you want a junior doctor that's done none of that? The theory, the practical, the teaching, they are a holistic way of learning practical skills and learning the motor patterns of how you actually do the job in front of you. So anyone that berates theory is berating all of learning pedagogy, basically, and saying that this isn't how the human brain works. And sometimes practical training is not practical in that particular case. It doesn't mean that there's no practical skills. I've definitely met academics that have gone from undergrad, postgrad, PhD, doctorate, professor job, never left the ivory towers of academia, and they've just been in university. But most of the time they're lecturing on theories and high level philosophical content. They're not going through how to train a dog to sit, and so that doesn't really matter. We need thinkers in society. I have never met a trainer or behaviorist that is, you know, this so-called armchair behaviorist that has no practical skills whatsoever. It's just not the way that most of us approach it. Most of us want to be hands-on, and if we're not, it's for a very good, justifiable reason.
Yeah, and you also get
I think
the other side of this, which is about, you know, when it comes to speed and precision and all of that, because a lot of trainers come from a sports background, I think. And don't get me wrong, I love dog training. I love dog training. I love the art of dog training. I love it more than possibly anything. Maybe music, I'm not sure.
Jeez.
Yeah, she's right there, man.
That goes without saying, right? But and this is the reason why I don't choose that method to train my dogs, even though there may be an argument for being quicker, and I think that's a dubious argument anyway. But the reason that I don't is because there's something much, much, much more important than speed and precision when I'm talking about dog training, and that's the relationship that either the guardian's got with the dog or that I have with my dogs. I want when I come through a door and my dogs lift their head up from a slumber and look at me, I want, with every ounce of their being, them to think I am someone they can go to who will never hurt them, will never intentionally hurt them, scare them. You know, I want to be somewhere where they feel safe, that they feel that they can, you know, be the dog that they are. You know, I want them to think of me as in a way of safety and love. I don't want them to think, oh, at any moment now he might do something unpredictable. I mean, I might do something unpredictable. I am me. But, you know, intentional, like, is what I'm talking about here. I want them to, you know, to really, really love being around me, want to be around me, for the learning experience to be a good experience for them and for me as well. You know, so, you know, I'll give a couple of days or hours or weeks or months or years for that every day. That's not a quandary that ever comes into my head. So this kind of, I see where people are coming from a little bit with that one. I see that, you know, because I have worked with guardians that are like, I'm at the end of my tether. You know, this is it. I've got this amount of time and I need to do it in this amount of time. And I want a quick fix and I want this. But for me, I think that it just comes down to that for me. It comes down to, like, without a relationship with your dog, you haven't got anything else. You know what I mean? That's the foundation that you're going to build everything off of. So go on.
I was just going to say, do you think that argument is just kind of used against us a little bit on occasion? I say us, you know, I really don't want to create those lines, them and us. No, I really don't. But like, there's a misconception that trainers that use positive reinforcement, it's permissive, you know, and that we're never addressing behavior problems. Perhaps we're only looking to create more freedom or more choice and all that kind of stuff. And I just don't see that from my day-to-day life, hanging around with lots and lots and lots of dog trainers.
Yeah, or that we're not allowed to use boundaries, you know, or have rules about how the house is set up or things along those lines. Yeah, you get a lot. That is a lot of things that happen. I
just moved Penny into a different room because I'm trying to pay attention to you guys, and she's got other ideas. Yeah. So, you know, I've just moved her into another room. I've made sure that she's got everything she needs, and
I think, I mean, I see the time discussion in lots of different, there's just so many different angles to time. I think you do a whole 2-hour session on that. And you know, if you as a trainer if you're thinking time is the problem, what about all of the other aspects? You know, maybe you've tried an approach that works, but you're not adaptable as a trainer, or maybe you're not the right person. That talked about personalities could be a barrier, but also, you know, I saw one argument which kind of said, oh, I'm so busy that I need to do things quickly because there's another guardian who's queuing up to be a customer. And, you know, I thought I think it was a bit of a humble brag how it was framed in how I read it, but actually, I thought that was quite sad because we go back all the way back to this regulation and being able to look across all of the hundreds of ATIs that are on the ABTC register, and the whole reason why you guys have taken on Pact and gone for this is that you want to be able to walk away from the sector one day and know that there's hundreds of trainers who can pick up jobs, you can refer between, and maybe refer to a behaviourist if what you're doing is, you could have all the time in the world, but you're not going to be able to see that change. And I think there's lots of ways of looking at time in the way that it's kind of framed. You might have a dog who's scared of the vet, and you could put a whole program together to kind of deal with that situation. But you go on a walk the next day and they break their leg, so you don't have time to do that. The situation's changed, and there is, you can look at all of the strategies and options available, but there isn't time, so therefore you have to take a different approach. And I think sometimes I've sort of heard this kind of like, you have this dog that runs out into traffic, and so you need to kind of use this certain tool because you need to quickly fix that problem. And there's kind of management kind of things, but there's would you run out in the road and quickly grab the dog and in an emergency situation do something which you wouldn't do in a training class to make sure that that dog is safe? And then you start to kind of unpick the thing about, doing something in a training situation versus in an emergency situation. They're very different. And if you then look at sports, and we go all the way back to the ethics thing of like, if the only way to get the dog to participate in this way is to use something aversive, like it's not time. There's a question of, should you be doing it in the first place? And I love watching dog sports. I used to love going running with Jack and stuff. And there's brilliant, amazing stuff when you see people doing things. But if you're thinking about time, you're forgetting about all of the other aspects of it.
Well, like the controversy before the Olympics with the dressage rider in the equestrian eventing, and I mean, I don't particularly enjoy watching dressage. I think it looks very unnatural, the movements of horses. I'd rather watch them enjoying their lives where they should be, grazing. But that's the bigger question, isn't it? And that's where the ethics comes in, because if that is legitimately the only way that you as a trainer can get that horse to do that particular movement, with the threat of that or the promise of the removal of that aversive stimulus, one, are you skilled enough? Are you actually using all of the options out there for you? And two, should we? Just because we can doesn't mean we should. And that comes again back to that Hippocratic oath and the kind of melding of the theory and the practical and the welfare considerations. And I think that's what makes an amazing trainer, being able to think outside the box and to be able to decide when something is, life or death, or is, let's park that for a bit, don't worry about that, and get your clients on side and be able to use everything available to you within the constraints of animal welfare legislation and welfare friendly, ethical and effective training. Having an open mind doesn't mean being open to all options out there, because some of the options out there are not conducive to animal welfare, particularly in the application of some aversive tools that are unfortunately widely available in shops in the UK. And that doesn't mean that you are shutting yourself off to things. I watched that video of that trainer, and I'm like, wow, if that's what it took, I'm not into that.
Yeah.
And that's okay to be able to say that, I think. And I feel like we've kind of lost the it's been taken away from us, maybe, to be able to say, if that's what it takes, I'm not into that. Thanks.
Yeah. Does it do those things work? Yeah, they work. Can you get
Mhm.
results? Yeah, 100%. Could
Mhm.
you become a world champion? Of course. But if you're telling me that you're gonna build the dog into something you want because you're using, you know, coercive control, then I'm out. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
that kind of simple at the end of the day, isn't it? And that's a really good point you brought up as well about, you know, can I imagine a world, right? This might be slightly controversial what I'm about to say, so get ready to hit the panic button. But
Okay.
can I imagine a world where you can use a tool in a way that isn't aversive to a dog? Yeah, I can. I really can. I can imagine that you could use an e-collar in an elegant way where you are just sending a signal to a dog, much like maybe, you know, if it was a signal to maybe a deaf dog or something along those. I can imagine that. Can I imagine that there are trainers out there at the top of their game in these sports and things that are doing that? Probably. I haven't had any experience watching them personally myself. Yeah, for sure. But does any of that stuff justify the fact that, like you say, like e-collars are available on Amazon? Someone brought up in one of these debates a really good point the other day, and they were talking about, you know, on one side, people were talking about the fact that e-collars can be used in this elegant, wonderful way to send signals to the dog, and which all sounds quite nice if you listen to it, especially if you listen to it from a point of not understanding how those tools maybe work.
Mm-hmm.
But the other person then said, if you want to know how e-collars are being used, go to Amazon and look at the reviews. Then you'll find out how e-collars are being used.
Exactly.
And that is the problem. That is the problem, because if we lived in a world where only those people use those things, would I have a massive problem with it? I don't know. I don't feel I can speak in those high echelons of sports training because it's not something I have experience with. But I watch people misunderstanding their dogs every day when I'm out and about. One of the worst things about getting into dog training, sorry for any new trainers listening to this, is that you gain an understanding of dog behavior and body language and things like that. And then when you're out in the park, you're like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. And you can never relax again.
It's just miserable dogs pretty much everywhere. Everywhere you turn.
Exactly. And when you see that level of misunderstanding from the general public, and adds to that you can go and buy one of these things today. They're illegal in Wales. I could buy one, get one delivered tomorrow. You know what I mean? And then look on TikTok and see how someone who's just quickly edited together a very quick video of how to get your dog to walk on a loose lead using one of these tools. That's the problem. That is the problem.
Also, like talking about elegant conversations, that's what our voices are. Like we were talking earlier, weren't we, about a video that's gone out there of this poor dog wearing pretty much every piece of horrible equipment you can imagine. There's sound on the video, but the handler says nothing to the dog during the whole session. Absolutely nothing, no guidance whatsoever. Of course, you're going to have to speak to or communicate to your dog in some way. If you're not using any kind of verbal information, what's the poor dog thinking? So, it's just keep it simple. We don't have to have all of these horrible bells and whistles. And it just comes back to all of the parallels with abusive relationships, coercive control. And it brings me back to, sadly, that some of these people that reach for these tools, some are very misinformed and they're just want a quick easy fix. Some have unfortunately fallen under a professional advising them to do so, and they're sort of following. But some of them, I think, genuinely, they like the power of being in control, and that's not what I'm about when it comes to living with my dogs. I wouldn't want any person to say that about me as a human and the relationship. And it's if my dogs could talk, I certainly wouldn't want them saying that about me. I want the same as what you were describing, Steve. I want, hey, it's my Nat. not, oh my God, she's here, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
I-
I'd add to that as well, just quickly, when you're saying about like the use of voice, just getting into the sort of trainer side of things. You know, it's one of the wonderful things about dogs is you can feel that connection and trust, and the way that people have interacted with dogs over the hundreds of thousands of years, that long line of unbroken relationships, has predominantly been through subtle ways. And if you've got a really good understanding of how to use positive reinforcement in training, then you genuinely don't need to use things like tools. You know, dogs are amazing. They've just got that kind of, that they've got that two-way communications with humans built in. They're absolutely incredible. Arguably, they're better than some other humans, you know, at communicating with other humans. And you can be a part of that as a dog trainer if you set yourself up to kind of receive it in the right way. And you know, and that's kind of a mindset in a way, but it can't just be in your mind. It can't even just be in your soul. It has to translate to what you do with your hands and how you interact with the dog as well. So if you want to be a part of that amazing relationship that has flourished across, you know, hundreds of thousands of years, you can do it. You can do it. And it just, yeah, sorry, I went on my soapbox.
No, it's great. It's good.
Yeah.
It is. And I think, so I'm trying to answer this, what makes an excellent dog trainer as well.
Yes.
And I think also the whole nature nurture debate, which again we haven't got time to go into, but what makes an excellent trainer is knowing your individual dog and also what your individual dog's genetics might be influencing in their behavior, and adjusting their environment appropriately to that, you know. And I think a lot of the time in the examples that are given, the dogs aren't being set up to succeed.
Yeah.
And that's when these really sort of strong tools get reached for, because people have got to the end of their tether. And I think, again, it just comes back to the, you know, watch one, teach one, do one. Get that theory, get an understanding of your dog, really be clear about what your ethical stance and morality is on how you want to live with your dog. Align yourself with people that want to do the same and are happy and courteous and respectful to have decent conversations when you're maybe a little bit iffy about something you've seen or heard or video that looks absolutely stonking. And go out there and do it. You haven't got to prove anything to anyone else other than your clients and your peers. And I think, you know, that probably is why I maybe haven't got as much time for these discussions. I want our students to feel comfortable to bring up questions about what might be discussed at them. I personally won't be watching or listening because I want to look after my own mental health and well-being, and I don't find that I get much positive out of it because of various reasons. But I'm trying not to just put my head in the sand about it all. But I also think that I've got nothing to prove to those people. You know, the people that I care about, what they think about, are here right now and listening, or, you know, are busy doing research, are busy training their dogs to do really worthwhile things like detect hyperglycemia, find people that have fallen down a mountain, you know, all those things that are actually beneficial to society, not necessarily to look flashy walking down a high street off lead.
Yeah. I put that little last bit in about you know, what does it look like to be a good dog trainer, because that comes up a lot in discussions, and I think that was a lovely mic drop speech there, Nat. I did really enjoy that.
Also, you know, when regulation is, you're accountable for your CPD. So, you know, we're always learning, all of us on this call right now, everyone, you know, we're all at it. And maybe when regulation isn't in place, the CPD you either might be sourcing, might be sending you down a path or you're not accountable to do it every year.
I actually did. I
Yeah.
wrote a list of the things that I thought made a good dog trainer, because I've been thinking about this for a couple of weeks on the run up to this. So I wrote a list, and I was interested to see if anyone
Yeah, I want to hear
agrees
this. Yeah.
or has anything to add to my list, because I think this is quite a nice thing. Right. So it's not necessarily in order, these things aren't, but
Got some sweets to listen to, Steve.
Yeah.
oh, good. It's not that long a list, don't worry. So I think this is the first thing. So you start from a welfare, well-being foundation. I think that's one of the things that makes a really, really important, a really, really, really good dog trainer. And I think that probably should be the start. That should be where everything starts. Then I've got a knowledge of body language, breed-specific behavior. Then I've got a strong foundation in positive reinforcement, like core skills. Then I've got a knowledge of learning theory. I don't think it's the be all and end all of the world, but I think to be a good dog trainer, you need to understand all of those things, understanding the quadrants, all extinction, flooding, all of the things that you need to know.
Mm-hmm.
Then I've got a baseline knowledge of health to a degree. I think that would be fair enough without stepping out of your comfort zone, etc. Then I've got assessment skills, so being able to assess what that dog might need. Then I've got problem solving skills. Then I've got hands-on skills, so that's just practically applying all of the things above that. Then I've got, this is huge as well, but coaching and consultation skills. And then finally, I've got having a community to run through ideas, problems in a safe space. I think all of those things together, that you will take a lifetime trying to get all of that stuff anyway, but that's it. That's the beauty of the journey. But if you've got a bit of all of those things, you will be an effective, good dog trainer.
I think it sounds great. It also sounds exactly like our ATA syllabus.
Yeah, well, I didn't cross-reference them. So
this
it would
isn't
be
an
interesting.
advert fact, I promise. But if you're nodding along to that, in all seriousness, that's how and why we write our courses. You basically, we could go through that same process with how we put our materials together for our students.
Yeah. Oh, Corinne, you're muted.
Corinne, you're...
Literally did that because I was eating sweets. I've forgotten what point, and I think you covered it, but I just elaborate. Oh God, I've got myself all distracted now because I was already thinking about my next point, and I've forgotten the point.
No.
Right. Firstly, let's go.
Here we go. Let's go back. Yeah. Rewind.
I was just going to say my second point now because I've forgotten the other point. Now it's gone. How frustrating is that? But that's life. My point was that we have not put this together for marketing, but like Nat says, if you are listening, and that's but we none of us actually really wanted to do this.
No.
We're doing it because we think that our student and members want to hear something from us.
Or anyone else listening in that's kind of it's great that we're saying we're not doing this for marketing, as we all sit there with the pack logo just to the top right by.
Hey, look, we pride ourselves on transparency, and this is genuinely like a bit of a response to sector issues. We have like a regular thing when we get together in our meetings. Are there any sector issues we need to address? Most of the time there isn't. There might be little things, if we want to do some campaigns, and we felt that it would be remiss to not talk about some of these larger than life topics, because I feel a responsibility for those of you that might be starting out. I know we all do, to help navigate some of these really tricky things that, I'll be honest, we all don't have the answers to as well. This is a very open discussion about how we feel about things ethically and why we do what we do. And there is a certain element of putting ourselves out there, but we're not doing it for marketing purposes. We're not doing it for a gimmick. We're not doing it to be deliberately, stirring the pot and try to get publicity. We're literally doing it for the welfare of the dogs that we work with, and the welfare and continued education of the students and members that are within our community. And I really hope that comes across as genuine. And yeah, I suppose it is quite funny that we've got our logos on and stuff, but hey, sometimes we have to be business people as well, guys. Okay.
Yeah, but let's not also hide that we're directors of this company, otherwise someone will just bring it up anyway. I remembered my point.
I just remembered a point. No, get it out. Is it about the sweets?
So Steve, I think you made a point about our client communications, but I think specifically being able to have difficult conversations as well, so that if you do end up with a client who hasn't read your terms and conditions and things like that, that you are able to have a conversation that isn't necessarily easy to have, so that you can maybe get that client on board. So yeah, difficult conversations like what we're doing now.
Yeah.
And you guys love that bit on the kind of practical aspect of the course. It's a kind of, role play. Not everyone likes.
Oh God, some of the students really get into it though. Important. They really get into it.
Yeah.
I call it role play, not role play.
I think. I was one of the discussions. I don't know, but I think, and this goes back to the kind of why we're doing this, and Nat touched on it, but I see quite a lot of what I would say kind of punching down. There's a lot of kind of criticizing people, and even if it's not directed, someone just saying it, I think has a negative impact on people. And I was talking to Steve about what we're doing through the course, and I said it's kind of like passing your driving test. There's the theory, there's the practical, there's the testing and assessment aspect of it. But when I passed my driving test first time, like everyone in my phone, just put that in there, I was not a good driver. That I had all the foundations of it, and I'd learned all of the, but it took years until or maybe not years, but it took a while. And it took kind of still continually learning and making mistakes and kind of developing to be a really good driver. And I think you could never have a course that's going to be completely perfect all the way through, because people will not necessarily pick something up, or it just takes time to they need to learn their pattern. And I think it's one thing I did agree with some of the things that I saw that kind of led up to this, where someone was saying about helping people develop the tools to be the dog trainer they need to be. And that's definitely something that we, there's all sorts of different reasons people do our course, and they go on to do dog training in all sorts of different ways. And some of them, they just do it because they wanted to go on a course and not even be a dog trainer. But if we were teaching people very prescriptive way of doing something, it might not work in different situations, and it won't give them the tools they need to be a good dog trainer. And I think that takes time to work that out, their way of explaining something, things like that. And I think the other thing that Steve says quite a bit, because of the amount of time you spend watching dog trainers, is that you learn through it, and you see people doing things in a different way. And I think a lot of people who maybe talk about dog trainers not learning practical skills, for a start, they really don't see how much work you all of you put into teaching people and assessing them and everything. But I think they're seeing the world from a completely different lens to you guys. You're seeing hundreds of trainers and watching all these videos of them using, and Corin mentioned it earlier, and they're seeing the world very differently, because you're seeing people quite privately, and there's a certain level of kind of vulnerability to sharing videos sometimes, and trust. But you're seeing loads of people, and I think I said to you the other day, Steve, you're kind of flooded in that world. You're seeing all these people that are putting themselves out there, and I think there's a certain degree of bravery to kind of say, you know what, I need to kind of learn, and I want to, and I'm willing to kind of share my videos. And some of our trainers put them on the Facebook groups, private groups, to kind of, so other people can kind of learn from it. And some of them just send the video through because they're not comfortable with that. And that's absolutely fine. But I think that's kind of missed, and there's a certain trust to that, you know, we're quite lucky that people do trust us with that.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I think people just need to be, and that goes back to that being nicer and caring and kind of, and not being critical. Because I think, you know, I could say, oh, you know, I don't think Steve wears hats very well, and
excuse me,
someone who wears a hat might suddenly kind of go, oh, well, maybe I don't wear my hat very well. And it can have a really negative impact on people. And I really, yeah. Sorry, Corinne. Yeah.
That's my experience of the wellbeing sessions. You know, that I'm seeing fabulous and really promising dog trainers not feeling good enough. You know, I'm not saying everyone's feeling like that, but I don't think these conversations help that. And I don't think that they necessarily. The problem is they need to skill up. We're all looking to, you know, increase our knowledge and look at our skills, but that's not the initial problem. I think it's you know, an industry at times that can feel a little bit daunting, like you're not good enough, you know, just the who in their day-to-day. I know I certainly don't. I'm like my worst horriblest critic. I'm not going around being like, I'm an excellent trainer, you know. So if I'm watching a video being like, what's an excellent trainer, I'm like, oh god, probably not me. You know, and I'm not sure that's you know, we're talking about that changing minds and opening it up and being more welcoming. I'm not sure it's creating that atmosphere.
No, certainly not creating a unified and united atmosphere.
The irony.
The irony.
One thing, Jay, this is me crossing you off my Christmas card list because of the comment.
Okay, brilliant.
Yeah, I was just saying, you wear a hat very well, Steve.
Am I still on it? Because
it kind of showed it, didn't it?
Fear not, we never send cards to anyone.
Yeah. I know.
There's one. Do you have one?
Oh.
So, okay, right. I think this is a nice natural moment to bring Le Chat Part 1 to a close.
My drink nearly went everywhere. Then.
Oh dear.
We have talked about
celebrate.
We have talked about doing a second part of this. It'd be interested to hear from listeners, students, and that if you'd like to hear us, because we have got other bits that we can discuss a little bit more. But yeah, I've quite enjoyed this. It's been quite nice.
I'd really like some, I'd love talking to you. I'd talk about it all day, but I do also worry about the way I come across. I don't want to be too forceful, but also I don't want to dilute my ethics, and I feel very passionately and strongly about things, and you know, that's unwavering at points. So I would really like to hear what people have thought about what we've discussed and how it's come across and whether it's been useful, basically. You know, has this helped you decide whether or not you engage in some of these things? Has it helped you decide what you personally and morally find acceptable and unacceptable when it comes to your dog training? I think that'd be really useful kind of next step.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, let's see if we can get some dialogue going, and that might give us an idea about how to move this conversation on. Has it confused you more?
Yeah, hopefully not.
Sorry if it has.
Hopefully, you know, we feel like we've hit some points as well and not just talked around them. But yeah, like Nat said, some feedback so that we can make sure that we can navigate conversations in the future. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, there's nothing left to do but say bye-bye. And we will see you next time, which will probably be a more informal and funsies episode of Barks on the Bookshelf. But yeah, so bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, thanks.
Bye.
Hey! Barks from the bookshelf, and we're gonna learn about our dogs. And barks from the bookshelf, and we're gonna learn together. Barks from the bookshelf, we're gonna learn about our dogs. And barks from the bookshelf, check out